Hey guys, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing my third official GameAccess.net podcast. And the topic I'm going to be talking about today is God of War from Sony Santa Monica and Ready at Dawn Studios. It's a big franchise, probably one of the biggest franchises that Sony has that's exclusive to their platform. Again, this is Maniac. I'm doing this one all by myself this time. My apologies for doing this podcast and the previous podcast by myself, but it's just, with people's schedules are the way they are and everything else, it's tough for me to find people that actually are people to be as guests for the show that are familiar with the subject matter and available to record. So I promise, if I can, I will get people to as guests for these podcasts, but unfortunately for right now, it's just me. So I want to talk a little bit about my first. As was the custom with these series, I kind of want to start off with talking about what my best memories are of the events and what I really liked about the games, and I wanted to start off with what my first memory of the games were. God of War first released, I believe it came onto the major scene probably around 2005. And I remember my first exposure to it being back when I was shopping at CompUSA. CompUSA, it's a store, I know I talk about this occasionally. It used to be one of my homes away from home, basically. I mean, I know there are a lot of people that have certain stores that they always shop at. For me, I would usually spend at least once a week, at least every weekend, I would usually stop by there at least once because I'd usually be comparing prices in there between there and Best Buy. I would usually go into CompUSA after going into Best Buy and either trying to find something I couldn't get at Best Buy or trying to find something I could get a better deal on. That plus, they were the only place that sold balls at the time. That was the only place I can get that soda. So usually I'd usually stop by there just to pick up a case of it whenever they had some. And that was where I got my first exposure to God of War. They had demo kiosks set up for the Xbox and for the PlayStation 2. And on the PlayStation 2 demo kiosk was the demo of God of War, the very first game. It was the Hydra scene, the Hydra battle. Very good sequence. And I saw the screens with the rain pouring down on the boats and the archers and all the undead and the ship. And I just thought, wow, that's on the PS2? That's amazing that they were able to get that kind of graphics on the PS2. And I played it a little bit and I thought, wow, the gameplay's tight, the controls are fantastic, very intuitive. Very impressive game. But I didn't have the PS2 at the time. But I never thought in the back of my head, if I ever get a PS2, maybe I might be interested in this game series. I looked further into it. Shortly after that, God of War really started to take off. It had been featured on G4, which was just on its way out at the time for decency standards. They had their own show about tips and tricks for games called Cheat, which used to be its own 30-minute show that Kristen Adams was hosting. And they dedicated a whole episode of the game to that. And I got to see some of the rest of the levels and the boss fights and everything else. And I thought, wow, that is a really fun-looking game. That's a really impressive-looking game. Because I always liked when they did that. They did it for Halo 2. I know that. I don't remember. I remember back when somebody else was hosting it. They used to do individual episodes for games all the time. Most of the rest of the episodes were all about various tips and tricks for different episodes, for different games. And I put it in the back of my head until my friend Twitch from twitchgaming.com, twitchgaming.wordpress.com, he was pretty much like my guide to console gaming because, like I said, I didn't have a PS2. I was just starting to dabble in it, dabble in last generation's consoles. Particularly, I think at the time I might have had a GameCube. I may have even had a PS2. An Xbox, an original Xbox. But I don't totally remember. And I remember playing the game with him because he had a copy of God of War, and he was the one raving to me. It's like, if you get a PS2, you have to get God of War. It's like that's like a must buy for the system. And I said, well, what's up? You know, can you show it for me? And he had just gotten a new surround system. He had just gotten a new high definition television at the time. And he said, dude, this thing really, really pushed my good, you know, it was a really good way to show off my new system. And he cranked up the surround sound and put on Dolby Pro Logic 2, and he set it to widescreen and put in the progressive scan, and he demoed the whole first level for me, of which I hadn't played yet. I hadn't had a chance to really play the whole opening sequence with the whole Hydra battle yet. And then we alternated. That was a fun time. I mean, we alternated between me playing, he played a little bit, I played a little bit, I played the sequence, he played the sequence, he showed me some tips and tricks, I figured some stuff out. I had a blast. I had a blast playing it. And that's when I realized how much I really liked the game and how much I really liked the subject matter that the game talked about. I was like, if I ever had a PS2, I would get that game for it. And that year, I believe it was 2005, my birthday came by, and I got a PlayStation 2 with my birthday money and gift certificates and other things. They had just released the slimline PS2s at the time, and the reason why I wanted a slimline PS2 was because, number one, they were not super, super expensive, but they also had the built-in Ethernet connections and the modem in there, and I knew I was going to use it online, so I didn't want to pay extra or pay separately for a Ethernet adapter, because the larger ones, I guess you would call them the fat PS2s, but the Model 1 PS2s, you either had to be lucky enough to find one with an Ethernet adapter that was included, or just have to buy it separately, and they were not included with used ones. So I bought a new slimline and with the Ethernet, signed up for the PlayStation, what the early version of the PlayStation sign-up system was, and ended up becoming a member of the Gamer Advisory Panel, and that was quite interesting. And the reason why I'm saying all this now is because being a member of the Gamer Advisory Panel actually got me a few of these stories. So that's pretty much how it happened. When I signed up for the early version of the PlayStation Network, because you had to register your console when you used it online for the first time, just to get it all programmed and everything else. I had signed up for a internet connection. I had signed up for the Sony service, and that put me on a Gamer Advisory Panel, which actually helped me out quite a bit. And I think I'm still on their mailing list, probably. I think they probably all changed when they started doing the PlayStation Plus service. But every once in a while I get emailed about a beta test or something, or I get some Sony pamphlets in the mail. So that was a cool thing. So I got my PS2. First thing, of course, as I'm sure you guys know from my previous podcast, the first games I played on it were Metal Gear Solid 3 and Metal Gear Solid 2, of course. But that Christmas, I ended up asking for God of War for Christmas, along with Resident Evil 4, which I also had enjoyed. And I played that game to death. I played the first God of War game to death. I had a blast. I had my high definition, progressive scan, my component cables with it and everything else, and I just had to play that game on a widescreen television. My dad had a widescreen television. I would be constantly bringing my PS2 down just so I could play it on that TV, just so I could get to see it on a widescreen, big screen. And I was so happy with it. I loved how it looked and played. It was so much fun. So much fun. I played it, I really did. My whole reasoning was that I really liked the unlockables with it. I'm a huge fan at the time, and still to this day. I know achievements have kind of taken over for this, but I remember back in a time when you'd play through a game and that was it. There was nothing else included with the game. It was just, you played from start to finish and that's the end of it. This game actually, there would be some games out there, the really good ones or the really high quality ones or just the ones that either had high production values or whatever, where they would include unlockable content in the form of a bonus disc, or they'd include documentaries that you'd unlock through the form of the game, or just there would be unlockables of some sort, and that would give me an incentive to replay. And God of War had some of the best unlockables I can ever recall, and that tradition does continue to this day, of course. You'd have to, you get some stuff unlocked for beating the game, you get some stuff unlocked for beating the challenges, you get some unlocked for beating the game on the higher difficulties. It was a major incentive in the days before they had achievements and trophies and stuff. To say nothing in the fact that all the documentaries that were included with that first game were just really interesting. It really, I was always a kind of a student of, oh God, how do I put this? I was always a student of the video game history and everything like this. I loved watching behind-the-scenes documentaries when they used to show them on G4. They don't anymore, which is unfortunate. I loved watching those documentaries that are included with limited editions or collector's editions of games. They stopped including those for the most part, but they still make collector's editions, but they don't really include behind-the-scenes documentaries with them anymore. Sometimes you're lucky you get an art book. But for the most part, now everything is all about figurines, and I don't know why. I mean, you have a statue to put on your desk. I get that, but I don't know. I just wanted something of substance. I liked having documentaries and DVDs that were, included interesting behind-the-scenes stuff of substance and things like that. I really like that. And God of War delivered. We got to see the making of the game. We got to be introduced to David Jaffe. Just some phenomenal stuff. And I remembered having to set aside a whole, just like a whole afternoon to beat the challenges in that first game. Because I figured my intention was I was going to try my best to beat everything on to unlock everything. I had set myself aside to actually beat everything, to unlock everything in the game. And I figured that in order to do that, I would have to beat the game I would just have to beat the game on any difficulty. I played it on easy. I'd have to beat the challenges, all of them, at one time in one go, because there was no selectable challenges at the time. You had to play them all consecutively, and there was no stopping, or else it would reset back to the first one. And I would have to beat the game on the highest difficulty. And then there's an Easter egg where you had to smash some statues. I didn't know about that one at the time, but I did later go back and do that. I loaded I think I loaded just an old save or something, and I was able to smash those statues up. And I remember at one point I spent like over a day trying to beat that game. I spent a whole night trying to beat the Hydra battle on God. It took a while. But those challenges at the time were the only challenges, even though there were 10 of them and they were really hard and you couldn't select them individually and you had to beat them all in one go. That was at the time the only challenges that I could actually beat in a God of War game. That was the only challenge room. Those were the only set of challenges that I could all beat consecutively. And at the time, that was like the only one I had I had gotten the PS3 trophy on, but I'll talk about that in just a minute. So I beat all the challenges. I start playing it on God. I make it up to the final 3-part boss fight. I cannot beat the second. I cannot beat the Kratos room. I can't beat the room. I just can't. I couldn't do it. And I had given up. And I said, screw it. I heard a rumor that I could beat it on like on the hard difficulty as opposed to the very hard difficulty. And I played through the whole game. Again, it took me much quicker because I had already beaten the game on God, so I had all the strategies down. And I made it to the last boss, and I couldn't beat that either. And I was so mad. I was just so mad. I think at some point I finally just like grinned and bared it, and did it. And I was able to actually, because I did beat the game on God, with no special. By the way, I did it with no special costume or anything like that. Back then, you could actually, if you had unlocked the costumes, you could play them on any difficulty. That even ones you hadn't beaten yet, except for God, they wouldn't work on God mode. But so I actually did beat it without a costume, and that did unlock the majority of the documentary. So I was satisfied with that. I never went back to beat it on God. But somewhere on my PS2 memory card, there's a save, which is on God and is up to the absolute last boss fight for God of War 1. Don't know if I'll ever go back to it. Now I've just basically been playing the games on the PS3. And so fast forward a little bit. David Jaffe gets promoted. We don't know what's going on with God of War. The PS3 is announced. The Xbox 360 is announced. I get my hands on an Xbox 360 a couple months after its release, no big deal. You hear the PS3 is coming out in a couple months from then. God of War 2 gets announced, and David Jaffe does the initial announcement. And we're thinking, all right, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be on the PS2. And I thought, hey, I don't have to buy a PS3. Saves me some time. I don't have to buy a PS3 just yet. I did end up eventually buying a PS3, but mostly it was for Resistance Fall of Man, but that's a different story. So I ended up I remembered pre-ordering God of War 2. And I can't exactly remember what the pre-order incentive was, but I definitely remember I had a copy of the demo disc for God of War 2. And I don't remember if I got it in the mail because of the Gamer Advisory Panel or if I had gotten it from pre-ordering the game. I think it might have been pre-ordering the game, but then again, I was on the Gamer Advisory Panel's mailing list, so I might have gotten it through there. I still have the demo disc somewhere. It was the opening sequence fighting the Colossus of Rhodes. And I figured, oh my god, they did it again. And the cool thing was they also included part of the full-length documentary. They included about 10 minutes of the full-length documentary that they included with the God of War with the God of War 2 disc. There was a separate bonus disc included in all U.S. copies of God of War 2, which included pretty much a feature-length documentary starring Corey Billig, the director of that game, and the making of the second game. In case you don't have a copy of God of War 2, the PS2 edition, don't worry. They did include the whole documentary with all the bonus features on the God of War collection for the PS3. It's just load in your copy of God of War collection and look under movies, and every single section will be there intact. So that was nice of them. But getting ahead of myself, I loved that opening. I thought fantastically they did the opening. The only major differences between the demo and the final version of the game, at least as far as I could tell, there was a bug or two with how the video was processed in that, but because they had released it to DVD, a separate disc, it wasn't a big deal in the final version. But I had some serious syncing problems, at least I should say vertical syncing problems with that documentary on the demo disc, except when I was playing the game in progressive. Playing the game in progressive, the problem went away. But I did seem to have a problem with watching it in standard. And they cut out the twins in the bathhouse scene, the 2-on-1 scene. They cut that out. But so I didn't know about that at the time. I didn't know. I had to find. I remember when I played the game, I'm like, this wasn't there before. These lovely ladies weren't here in the demo. But I had an inkling because that area was still locked off. There was just nobody behind it. I don't know if they cut that out because of the demo or if they cut that out for it just wasn't there at the time, but I think they probably had just decided to censor it because that demo disc was going out to all ages possibly, so they probably had just decided to not include that for risk of anything else. So playing through God of War 2 was a joy. I had such a good time playing that game. And if I had one comment to say, I have to say I was really happy with the decision that they made to make God of War 2 a 2-disc set and have the second disc, which was included with all U.S. copies as far as I know, include basically a special edition bonus disc. And I don't know if the reason why they chose to do that was kind of an incentive to buy the game, even though the PS3 by that point had been released. Or if it was a marketing decision, or if it was like have every game be a collector's edition game kind of thing. I don't know. But I thought it was a great decision because that bonus disc worked on all DVD players. It worked in PS2s, don't get me wrong, but it did work in all DVD players. So I really liked that they chose to do that because then you had all these documentaries which can still be watched. I mean, if I wanted to watch anything that was downloadable, any of the downloadable documentaries that came with the God of War 3 collector's edition, sorry. If my PS3 ever breaks, I'm on my own. Regardless of whether or not I back the data up, it has to be played on that original PS3. That is a bad decision, Sony. That was a really bad decision for you to make. And so I can watch those documentaries forever now. So I was really happy about that. It was a really good. They had decided to. I think what the decision was because that the first documentaries were so good, and they were short. They were only about 15 minutes a piece at most, maybe. They were for short. They had good substance to them, and they did it. They really wanted to make like a behind the scenes kind of look into it, and this was about an hour. I'm sure it was like over an hour in full, and even with all the extras and everything else, I think they went over an hour. But they made a great decision to do that, and it was a fantastic documentary, and documentary series, I should say. I remember watching it a lot. As for how I did with my plans for unlocking everything in the second game, I was able to obviously beat the game on easy. I think I even beat the game on normal for kicks. And remember the unlockable stuff was that there were certain urns you had to find and stuff like that in the game. And I remembered I was able to find all the ones, at least all the ones in the game itself, that I had to find. And I had a blast doing that. I was able to find all the urns. I was able to, at least the ones that were findable in game. And I was able to find all the, just beat the game and unlock everything. There was a second unlockable, which was basically remove 20 Cyclops eyes. There's actually a simple trick to doing that. You only have to just basically, what happens is that you basically, there's only about, I think maybe a total of 4 Cyclopses over the course of the campaign of the game. But in the Challenge of the Titans, which is that version's challenge maps, there's only 7 challenges and they're selectable, but you have to beat each one to unlock the next one. I remember that that first challenge was actually super easy, and there was a Cyclops in it, so you could basically just keep playing that over and over again until you got all 20 eyes, and then you'd unlock the special 20 eye Cyclops unlockable. And for the PS3 version of the game, actually, that's an achievement, or I should say a trophy. So keep that in mind when you guys are, if you guys actually want to get that, well, how do you get the 20 Cyclops eyes? There's only 4 in the campaign. You don't have to pay the campaign constantly, even though that would count. You just got to play that first challenge like about, I don't know, 16 times or so. And it's doable. It's an easy challenge. Once you remove the Cyclops' eye, it's done. It's over. So it's doable. So I was able to get that unlocked. I tried my best to play the game. I couldn't beat the challenges. The challenges were just too tough. I don't think I was able to get past like the second challenge at the highest. And I just like threw the controller away in frustration about it. I just like, you know what, I had to stop. I couldn't stand it. I just couldn't play it. I couldn't beat them. Once the second challenge came up, I remember the difficulty coming to like just impossible. And I stopped. I just stopped. And I never beat the challenges on the PS2 version. I think I might have gone back to it occasionally and tried to beat it, but I never beat all of them. I don't know. I don't remember how far I got. But that was like one regret I always had. And I remember there was difficulty unlockables for both beating the game on hard and beating the game on Titan. So God and Titan were 2. I think that was what it was called. Hard was the God. They moved that to God as opposed to I think Spartan was hard in God of War 2. You see, here's the thing. It's like it's always tough to kind of call them by their names, by their official names, because every once in a while the hardest difficulty doesn't have the same name as it used to. I think after God of War 2 they stopped calling it Titan. They just called it like God mode or something like that. But but basically I'm talking about there was an unlockable for hard and there was an unlockable for very hard. They didn't tie documentaries into it anymore because they moved all the documentaries to the second disc, so you could watch that no matter what, as many times as you liked, regardless of if you beat the game or not. They put spoiler warnings. But the cool thing about that was that they basically had, I think the majority of them were there were unlockable outfits. It was unlockable outfits, and then there was a challenge. There was a challenge rooms which could only be unlocked by beating the game, but it was also they had there was a bunch of things for actually rankings on the challenge rooms, and depending upon your ranking, your final ranking from beating all the challenges, you could unlock a special unlockable skin, which may or may not have had special abilities. I don't remember. And you could unlock an arena. I never beat them, so I never unlocked either of those. But I was able to beat the game, and I'm fairly certain I think that I just got stuck on beating the game on the high. I think I actually was so frustrated with, at the time, trying to beat the challenges, that I just decided it would be easier to beat the game on the highest difficulty straight off. And I actually did try to do that, and I got pretty far. I think I got as far as one of the as not one of the Sisters of Fate, but I think I got as far as like one of the rooms that were one of the puzzle rooms and like one of the later portions. I was pretty deep into the temple before I gave up. And I was trying to I think I had to keep this guy alive to make him read a thing, but I kept getting attacked, and it was really tough. I just couldn't beat it. I gave up. And finally, I think I just tried to play it on a lower difficulty, and I was able to get further in it, but I was never able to beat it on the hard difficulty. So I think basically, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a good game, but it was tough. It was really tough. In fact, I think it was probably harder. It was tougher for me to progress in the second game than it was for me to progress in the first game. So I think I finally just got tired of it, and I just put the game away, and I later bought a PS3. But by that point that God of War 2 came out, there was a secret announcement with the God of War 2 manuals in the back of the God of War 2 manuals. And this leaked out when the reviewers started getting copies of the final version of the game. They got full copies with manuals. And they saw on the back of the manuals, they said, God of War PSP coming. And everyone knew that the next God of War game, and God of War 2 ended with a major cliffhanger. Where, and actually, if I had to say, like, some of the best endings for a cliffhanger, God of War 2 had one of those best endings. I don't know if any of you have played God of War 2, but I kind of held off on mentioning spoilers here. But now I'm going to spoil God of War 2 for you. Sorry. Please turn the video off after 3, 2, 1. There's a great scene where Kratos goes back in time, rallies all the Titans that were assumed died in the Great War after Zeus had, quote-unquote, destroyed them using the weapon that he had forged. And he brought them flashed them forward into the present. And he, there's a great scene where Zeus is rallying Hades and Hermes and, oh god, who else? Poseidon. He's rallying all his brothers and some of his children. And he says to them, he's like, let's put aside our petty differences. We've got a war to win. We're going to win this. And all of a sudden, there's a pounding on Mount Olympus. There's like a thump, thump, thump. And Zeus looks over, and he sees that the Titans are climbing the pillars, trying to get to Olympus. And there's Kratos riding on the back of Gaia, the sword of the blade of Olympus in his hand, saying, "Zeus, I bring the destruction of Olympus." End of game. And they just ended it right there. To be perfectly honest, I know Halo 2 ended with the cliffhanger, but I think that, riding on the back of a Titan, holding a weapon of mass destruction, coming for the king of Olympus, was a pretty badass way to end a game. I mean, that was perfect. That to me was like, oh, we don't get to play it, but you know what? I don't care anymore. That image and that act is just awesome enough as it is. And it was perfectly, I'm like, they could end it right there. I thought that was a great ending. I really did. I thought that was probably one of my favorite endings of games of all time, was that second game's ending. Don't get me wrong, though. The first game's ending was fantastic, too. It was also a pretty all-encompassing ending. And if you compare the second ending to being like a cliffhanger, and the first ending being the way it wasn't so much a cliffhanger, actually, that first game was totally one completely circular story. I think it's probably because they didn't think they would make a sequel. They left openings in some of the unlockable videos for ideas for what would have become later games. None of those ideas really got used until Ghost of Sparta came out, but I'll talk about that when I talk about Ghost of Sparta. But when you think of it like this, the game is called God of War. The first game, your objective is to kill the God of War. You kill the God of War after accomplishing an Olympian quest, very, very similar to what Perseus had to do, or basically there's just so many stories about all these heroes or gods or sons of God and daughters of gods that had to complete some quest that was very difficult. They'd have to go through Hades or all these difficult things. Here you are doing an Olympian quest. You're seeking out Pandora's box. And with it, and it's very difficult, and it's like Indiana Jones by David Jaffe's own admissions. It was partially inspired by that. It's almost like a theme park ride or something. And in the end, you use what you had to spend the whole game searching for, and you defeat the God of War. And then you become the God of War. End of game. You know what? Fantastic. That works. It works on a lot of levels because it's a completed story. In the second game, it ended with a cliffhanger. I know that pissed off a lot of people, but you could have left it at that too. It's like, oh, Kratos wins. You could assume that. I mean, here you have this huge badass, just open, epic ending where Kratos is riding on the back of Titans, which are enormous, about to kill the gods with Zeus's sword. Awesome ending. So that ending was probably up there for me for one of the best, just one of the most badass endings of all time in games. So I got to give it that. So fast forward a little bit. I actually had a PSP before I even had a PS2. I think I got a PSP shortly, maybe like a week or two, or maybe a little bit longer than that, but probably less than a month after the PSP's launched. Again, Twitch had gotten one day and date with some games like Ridge Racer and Metal Gear Acid and I think Lumines. I can't remember. He had gotten 3 games with it. I don't remember what. I remember the third. I don't remember what the third one was, but I definitely remember he had gotten Ridge Racer and Metal Gear Acid with it. For me, he demoed it for me, and I was pretty impressed by it. I really did like it a lot. I thought the screen was pretty good. I thought the way it worked was pretty good. I liked the Wi-Fi support, and I knew that a lot of stuff at the time. I mean, those initial PSPs didn't have a lot of the features that the PSPs have now that they brought on. It didn't have web browsers at the time, although it did have the Wi-Fi, the internal Wi-Fi support. Obviously, there was no PS3, so it had no PSP to PS3 connectivity. But some games did for the PS2 did decide to take advantage of PSP connectivity, but that was their own decision, their own software codings. The PS2s had some USB ports on the front panel, so if they had chosen occasionally to do that, which I thought was pretty cool. They had their own little connectivity software and stuff like that between games. Metal Gear Acid 2 being the major proponent of that, I think. Although there were definitely some other games that had that features. Just Metal Gear Acid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence was the only one I can think of. But I had a PSP, and so of course, here I'm hearing Chains of Olympus is coming out. I had to get it. I remembered I got the Chains of Olympus demo in the mail. I don't remember if I had to send out for that, if they just sent it to me. But it was the Chains of Olympus demo that was really what solidified it for me to pick up that game. I don't think I pre-ordered. Definitely didn't pre-order, but I don't think I remembered any pre-order incentives coming with it. But I definitely remember that when it came out, it was like $40. By that point, heck, I remember some PSP games at launch were $50. They kind of did away with that after about a year, but oh my god. Grand Theft Auto of Liberty City Stores was $50 at launch. I mean, that was expensive. And I remember I paid it. And what happened was that Chains of Olympus comes out, and a lot of people thought the God of War abilities couldn't be done on a handheld, particularly because there was no second analog stick. Obviously, the Vita took care of that. But people were saying, how does the dodge work and stuff like that. But to be perfectly honest, and to give it to Ready at Dawn, they translated over pretty much everything. Even without an analog stick, they pretty much... Because I remember the first time I played God of War, I was just so used to using the analog stick to move the camera around. And I was, I was told by Twitch, no, Maniac, this is a fixed camera. And I said, but fixed cameras are shit. They never work. Fixed cameras always never show you anything useful. There's either be something in your way or something that's, they're terrible. It's like, you can't tell me that this whole game is one fixed camera. He says, no, no, no. It works. The fixed camera's okay. It will never give you a problem. And I remember when he first demoed it for me, I couldn't believe him, but I'm a believer now. I had remembered from a long time, not too long earlier, I remembered the fixed cameras from that Batman game, Dark Tomorrow, being like the biggest complaint about that game series ever. And I remember some of the Spider-Man games, particularly having everybody's having problems with the camera. Either the camera doesn't fit, isn't tight enough, or it never adjusted itself properly. So I had always read in a lot of these reviews about, oh, the camera, even with the manual aim, is terrible, or the camera's bad here, fixed camera's bad here. When it's starting with God of War, fixed camera actually became a feasible option. So that's definitely a tribute to the developers for that. So you had Chains of Olympus coming out, and so the second analog for the camera wasn't a problem, but it was the dodge. Everybody was complaining about. Number one, there was no dodge, and there was no second analog, so there was no dodge. And two, there's no second shoulder buttons, so you have fewer buttons in general. So they had to do combos of buttons and stuff like that, and that took some getting used to. You'd either have to select you'd have to select your magic or tribute your magic to something else. But they did some jerry-rigging, and for the most part, it worked. It wasn't like the other games it had, but for what they'd chosen to do, it worked. So it was definitely a good experience, and it was fun. And the graphics, a lot of people said that the hardware for the PSP was somewhere between the PS1s and the PS2s. And when God of War came out, when God of War Chains of Olympus came out, it was pretty close to holding its own against the PS2s. Obviously, there were a few aliasing issues. It's mostly noticeable if you ever watch one of those documentaries about, or those short videos that they did about comparing the PSP graphics to the PS3 graphics for the Origins collection. But for the most part, looking on that screen, on that little screen, those graphics did hold their own, and the resolution did hold its own as well. So I definitely got to give him that. And it was a fun experience. And I remember playing the demo first thinking, oh God, let's get a taste of this. And I remember just being completely blown away. And I remember at the end of it, after finishing it, now I knew that Chains of Olympus was going to be a prequel story. They announced that right after God of War 2. It was like people were saying when God of War 2 came out, is this Chains of Olympus game that that people were going to be picking up? Is this going to pick up on that cliffhanger? Can they possibly pick up on that cliffhanger? Should they pick up on that cliffhanger? And the developers said, no, this is going to take place before God of War 1, and we're not going to touch the cliffhanger. This is just going to give more backstory about Kratos and what he's done before what he did for the gods before God of War 1. So I was happy with that. I also thought that I was happy with the fact that they carried over the CGI cutscenes. One of my favorite portions of God of War series was the CGI cutscenes, and I was glad that they kept those in. They kept all the voice actors and all the moves, everything, some new moves, the weapons, everything was very they translated over everything phenomenally. That's just testament to Ready at Dawn. I kind of thought the ending was a little cheap for that one, that they stripped Kratos of all of his stuff at the very end. But leading up to that, seeing that in the final boss fight, particularly, when you're fighting the final boss, I don't want to say who it is, but seeing that you were the person that actually was the one who chained Atlas to the to where he was in God of War 2 was just really cool. Was a really cool way to wrap that up. In fact, that's probably like one of my favorite portions of the ending. I like that part of the ending. I just didn't like the after credits coda where you see Athena and somebody else stripping Kratos of his of the stuff that he had accomplished. But you know what? They had to do that because he didn't have it in God of War 1. Otherwise, he would have used it. And if I had one complaint about God of War Chains of Olympus, and that's something I wanted to talk about, just from a story perspective, not a gameplay perspective, I have one complaint about that, and I want to have that on record. I'm thinking about posting that up to the IMDb, at least. I don't know if it's a goof. I don't know what to call it. but it kind of felt a bit wrong. But let me explain this. If I had one complaint about Chains of Olympus, it's what the final boss is. In the final boss, you have to defeat a god. I'm not going to say who it is because that would ruin the game. So, no spoilers here. You have to kill a god at the very end. Again, not going to say who it is. But they're dead. They are dead. And in later games, they do make mention of the fact that that god is dead also. So, it's a canonical death. And it's a canonical kill. But here's the thing. Chains of Olympus took place before the first God of War game. The first God of War game was released first for the PS2. Established that the killing of a god is a pretty big deal. Especially for a mortal to do it. And that just completely goes in the right direction as to what was going on with the mythology that they were dealing with. In the original mythology, yes, killing a god was a very, very, very big deal. It was either very difficult even for a god to do it. Thinking of a mortal killing a god, that was enormous. Was it possible? Probably. I'm sure there's somewhere there's somebody killing, there's some mortal killing a god somewhere in one of those stories. I haven't read all of them, but I'm familiar with some of them. In fact, actually, in some of the stories I read, King Midas actually asked for his curse back and was given a way to save his daughter. So, I'm familiar with a lot of those mythological stories, of course. And so, killing a guy being a big deal totally fits within that. Having to use Pandora's box, well, obviously in the original mythology, Pandora's box was open, but I'll give you some leeway there. So Pandora's box, everything else, Kratos uses it against Ares. He's able to not become godlike, but become strong enough to have a chance at killing Ares. Otherwise, without it, he never would have even had the slightest, even remotest chance. But in Chains of Olympus, Kratos is able to kill this god without much fanfare, just based upon his own strength. Granted, he has his weapons, like the Blades of Chaos, for example, and he later gets something else like the Gauntlets of Zeus, which he finds in Hades, which is like that game's special secret weapon, or special unique weapon. But there's no fanfare like, this gauntlet is what will kill a god. And there's no talk through most of the game about this, what he's about to do, that he's killing this god being a big deal. Now, granted, you could say, well, that's kind of because at this point it's the third game, even though this was the third game produced, even though it takes place before the other games. There's no real fanfare about this god's death. The only thing they really teased upon in the previous games was the whole bit with Atlas. Atlas does specifically mention that Kratos was the one who put him there. So that was a big, so there was continuity between God of War 2 and God of War Chains of Olympus, even though God of War 2 was released first. But there's no mention in any of the first game or any of the second game about that god's death in Chains of Olympus, which was kind of surprising. He specifically says in Chains of in God of War 2, these two gods that have died in this game and in the previous game are dead. And he doesn't make a mention of the other god that he had killed before God of War 1. Or, in fact, he doesn't mention the god he killed in Ghost of Sparta either. So, I don't know if that's an error. I don't know what to call that, but I thought that was kind of odd. That was always something that just misplaced me. Particularly because it was the lack of fanfare about that he was able to kill this just based upon his own mortal strength. He did kill a god. Say nothing about the fact of how powerful this god was. He was able to kill this god. So that was, and just being immortal, not with seeking out anything special, just based upon his own strength that he was able to accumulate over the quest. That seemed a bit off to me. And again, there's no mention of it in the first game in particular. It's like, the first game is treated like killing a god is a really big deal. Replaying it after playing Chains of Olympus seems a bit off. But I know that has to do with the fact of, that they did produce this game later and it was, a prequel, sequel kind of thing. But I don't know, maybe they shouldn't have done that, or at the very least it could have been something different. So that's my spiel about the end of Chains of Olympus. Then sometime after God of War 3 gets released, sometime after Chains of Olympus gets released, I pick up a PlayStation 3. And I don't exactly remember when they made the announcement for God of War 2. I'm sorry, for God of War 3. I don't remember when they made that announcement. God of War 3 came out in beginning of 2010. I know they had a major E3 showing in 2009 of it, but I don't think that was when they made the announcement that the game was coming out. I think they might have done that maybe in the beginning of 2009, or I just don't remember. But it was definitely Chains of Olympus came out in 2008. God of War 3 must have been announced sometime between 2008 and 2009, but I don't remember exactly when. But I remember people saying when they said it was going to be on the PS3, it was a seriously big deal. It was a seriously big deal. And all eyes were really looking to that 2009 E3 for what they were going to do. And I remember watching the live broadcast of the God of War 3 press show for Sony, where they got to show the whole E3 demo. No, I'm sorry, they didn't even get to show the whole E3 demo, but they had the whole E3 demo ready to go, and they could only show about half of it because of time, which was bullshit. Bullshit. That's the game everybody wanted to see. You fucking show it. You know, the rest of the thing being damned. And it was just a really long demo. And I remember a lot of people were looking forward to going to see it. I did not get a chance to see. I didn't get a chance to go to E3 2009. But I really was looking, but I really was following it very closely from where I was. And I remember specifically that a lot of people were trying to get their best to get their hands on that demo, or at the very least play it and show it on television after the E3 event. They could only show about half of it. In fact, actually, right after the event, G4 was interviewing Jack Tretton, who was like the big guy at Sony for at least for the PlayStation department. He's the guy that VP Kevin Butler has in his keeps a picture of in his office desk at all times. And I remember when they were interviewing Jack, they intentionally demanded to get a copy of that demo unit that was demoing the God of War demo, just so they could televise live while they interviewed him before they wrapped up the event, or I should say wrapped up their coverage of the event. Not the event was already wrapped up by that point, but the live broadcast was still going on. And I remember that they had, I think it was Sessler, I think they had Adam Sessler interviewing Trenton while they were going through the demo. They were televising the demo and interviewing Trenton at the same time. And they showed a bit more of the demo. I don't think they were able to get through all of it and show the conclusion, but they were able to get a bit further with it because they had us restart it from scratch. And a lot of people were just going berserk that they wanted to get a chance to play the demo. Now, obviously, the E3 attendees got to get a chance to check out the demo. From what I've been told, the demo was given, was displayed at the 2009 E3 in the demo kiosk that they had set up. But only the E3 attendees could be able to play it at the time. And then they made the announcement that they were going to release the demo with Blu-ray copies of District 9. And that made a lot of people happy. That made a lot of people happy. Because there was no talk at the time of a God of War collection being released. That came later. But there was talk that people wanted to play this demo. And they said that they would indeed continue the, include the demo with copies of District 9. Now, for people who haven't seen District 9, or seen it on Blu-ray, I have to say this. It's a great movie. And I'm glad they included that, that demo with District 9, because that gave me an excuse to watch District 9, and I freaking loved it. So, I specifically got a chance to play the demo with District 9, but I got to watch, I watched District 9 with a friend of mine. In fact, I think I remember watching it with the unknown camera person. And because they had seen it before in the theaters or something, and they were telling me how good it was, and we watched it together. And big, great movie. If you haven't seen it, try to watch. Try to find check it when it's on TV, rent it. It's a great movie, it really is. But the demo that was included with it, absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I don't want to go too much into it because there's just really not too much to say about it other than how awesome it was. You know, you're in a battle and the gods are fighting the Titans and you're in there you're in there as you kind of knew this was going to happen. It was like in the middle part of the game. It was not at the beginning of the game where it usually is. But it was a fantastic opening. I mean, it was opening for the people to see. And they had included actually a documentary with it, which was not included with the later downloadable versions of the demo. They included part of the documentary, which ended up in the final version of God of War 3. I think it was part of the Tech Art documentary in particular, where they interviewed Jason McDonald and one other person who I can't remember. Jason McDonald, of course, being the namesake of the Speed of Jason McDonald trophy for God of War 1, which is beat the first God of War game on any difficulty under 5 hours. That was the last trophy I had to get with that. I think in my best speed run for God of War, I could beat it on easy in about maybe 2:45, 2:30, 2 hours 30 or something like that. I'm sure people have probably been able to beat it faster, but that was the fastest I was able to beat it on. And the reason why I did it was because I knew it was a speed run. I skipped a lot of things, but I was still able to beat it okay. And I was able to get that trophy. But it was a cool documentary, and I was kind of hoping that they would include that with either a collector's edition or just with the final version of the game. For those of you who don't know, yes, that is included in literally in all versions of the game. You just basically unlock it when you beat the game. That's one of the many smaller documentaries that's included with the video series. So everyone's appetite is just ready for God of War 3. And I remember I used to be a teacher. I may start teaching again. I don't know yet. But I may start teaching again. I used to be a substitute teacher. And I remember having a class, an English class, that was, at the time, talking about Greek mythology. And this was 2 days before God of War 3 was actually going to get released. And I had my pre-order ready. I had my pre-order down already for the Ultimate Edition of that game. I had been playing the demo nonstop because by that point God of War Collection had come out. They had released... if I remember correctly, God of War 3 got released in March of 2010. The God of War Collection got released, I believe, in around November of 2009. Yeah, because that's when my trophies were listed. The God of War Collection was basically an updated re-release version of God of War 1 and 2, up with the higher resolution. It kept the same textures and the same stuff, but they did improve they did graphically improve the resolution of all the original stuff. Basically because at that time, PS3 games, or I should say PS2 games, didn't work on the new PS3s. And people still wanted to get copies of God of War and play copies of God of War, so they just figured, retool for the PS3. Little did they know, by doing that act and the major sales that that game got, it opened the floodgates of a lot of HD remakes. And you know what? A lot of people are going to have comments about that. I'm going to devote a video to it pretty soon. Twitch and I were talking about it, and we're going to devote a video to that coming up. So I'm going to talk more about that later. But I just want you guys to know that that's something that has been discussed, and it's something that will be talked about later on, about the floodgates of HD remakes and stuff like that. But that's probably, I think, where it started. And I know that games have been remade and re-released even at that point, but this was a few times where it was like a straight port years after release. The major icing on the cake, at least at the time, was that, number one, it wasn't being charged full price. I think it was charged anywhere from $30 to $40. I don't remember the exact price. Could have been either. It was coming out just before Christmas, so it was a good game to pick up during your Christmas shopping list. And it came with the downloadable copy of the God of War. It came with an unlock. It was literally a download code for the God of War 3 E3 demo, which at the time was not available except unless you picked up a copy of District 9 or something. So that's basically what happened. And that gave me a chance to replay God of War 1 and God of War 2, particularly for the trophy support. And right now, since I've gotten those games, that's pretty much how I always play God of War 1 and 2 now. I know I should probably go back and replay them on on the original PS2 hardware, my original PS2. But yeah, I'm not going to sell those PS2 copies. It's not happening. But I I really just really like the higher resolution and stuff like that, and the fact that I can just pop it in. I got the trophy support. So, as I was saying before I got sidetracked, I used to be an educator. I used to actually be a substitute teacher in the district, and because I have an English degree, I know, right? I figure I have this website. I've been writing all this stuff. What's my credentials on this? I do have my degree in English, and with that, I could actually teach because I couldn't, because it was something I could do. It was something I had been, my schooling had prepared me for, and it was something I was interested in that was available. And to be perfectly honest, there were times, I definitely enjoyed it because I got to actually, I got to educate. I got to pass on what I had learned, which is, I think, a lot of, it's a thing that a lot of teachers have. I liked teaching to eager minds. I did. And at the time I was in this class, and this was, again, 2 days before God of War 3 was to come out, so I had my pre-order down for the Ultimate Edition. I was ready. I was about as fired up for you could imagine. It just happened that the English class I was covering for that day was talking about and was covering mythology, Greek mythology. So I was as happy as I could possibly be to be in that class that day. And I remember having a lot of discussions about this. Now, like I said before, I know my mythology. I've read a lot of the famous mythological stories that the God of War games are based off. All of my mythological experiences are not only solely delegated to God of War. I've read the stories. Now, granted, a lot of the stories that we know nowadays are reprintings from the original stories. Embellished, there are embellishments. There are incorrect. The one book that you read where you read the same story might be different from the next book that you read, but it's the same basic story. So obviously, not everything is identical because there's a lot of times there's no consensus on what happened to some of these people. A lot of people think that King Midas's daughter died when he touched her, and there was no bringing her back. When in fact, I've read a version where not only did he bring her back after giving up his curse, giving up his golden hand, he gave it up. He was able to get it back, and he was told how to bring her back. It was like this was not a morality. This was a morality tale that could be undone. And there's later stories with him in them. So obviously he didn't just, it wasn't a story. Some stories I read where, he had turned her to gold, could not bring her back under any circumstances, cursed with his hand, killed himself or something like that. Well, that didn't totally happen. I mean, I read stories where he later on he was, done with, dealing with gold and just decided he was going to hang out in nature and became BFFs with the god Pan, which is where the term pan flute comes from, because Pan would always play a flute. And so there's no consensus on any of that stuff. But so here we are I'm having this discussion about mythology with high schoolers, and I'm having this is a pretty good time. This is like one of my best memories, because this is where I was talking, I was talking to some of them about, Poseidon being responsible for the creation of a horse, for example. In case any of you have played God of War 3 and don't know why there are horses in Poseidon's water wake, it's because Poseidon had invented the horse. At least according to the Greek mythology, he had built it in comparison with in comparison to what Athena had to offer. The cool thing about it was that it's there was it's not a pun. There's not seahorses. The person who had modeled the battle figure of Poseidon had read this and thought it'd be really interesting that, Poseidon was the god of horses. And he decided, hey, he'd be really cool if he had horses, made up in the water while you're having to fight him. And that's all based upon actual real things. So that's totally, totally, totally authentic. Because whenever you see your horse, you say, hey, you were created by Poseidon. That's what the Greeks believed. So we had this whole discussion about Zeus winning the war with the Titans, and for you guys who don't know, the blade of Olympus that Zeus had created was not in the original mythology. It kind of takes the place of something that was in the original mythology, which was the lightning bolt. That Zeus, during the war with the Titans, had found power over the lightning bolt, or at the very least had either created the lightning bolt or gotten control over the lightning bolt, which at the time was considered to be the most devastating weapon ever conceived of. Basically the first weapon of mass destruction, if you will. Ha 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 ha. He's up there. Zeus is up there. And he's got him. And so Zeus is lying up there with the with the weapon of with this lightning bolt, this weapon of mass destruction, uses it against the Titans and wins the war with the Titans. In the game's continuity, Zeus had already had power over the lightning bolt. Zeus, God of War 1 established. Of course, he has the lightning bolt. He has the power of the lightning bolt. He even uses it against you on several occasions in God of War 2. And the Blade of Olympus was something else. Was something else that he had created. But as far as I know, there's no continuity with the Blade of Olympus. There's that as far as I know, there's no. But that having been said, it is a pretty awesome weapon, and I always like talking about it. I'm a huge fan of the Blade of Olympus. I wish they had used it more in God of War 3. Anyways, God of War 3's Ultimate Edition comes out, and, well, needless to say, it is a huge, huge disappointment for me. Some of my first videos and articles, actually for this website, was me complaining about how terrible this God of War 3 Ultimate Edition was. It was all DLC for the most part, with a $40 premium, which was a heavy premium at the time. This was 2010. Those heavy collector's editions were, coming out for $100 was not commonplace just yet. A lot of collector's editions were coming out for like $80, $85. I mean, the days of the $10 premium were pretty much on their way out. Thank you, by the way. Thanks a lot, Capcom and Devil May Cry 4. You're to blame for this. And that's pretty much where it happened. That's, the $100, if there was going to be a $100 collector's edition, you'd have to expect that there would be some major inclusions with it. And for the most part, all you had was a cool looking plastic box, which was modeled after the Pandora's box. Granted, that's pretty cool. And a tiny book that basically usually came with like $70 collector's editions. The tiny art book. So it wasn't even a full-sized art book. And then there was a leaflet with all the DLC. Most of that DLC was broken. The only DLC that actually worked day one, at least for me, was the DLC including the challenge maps and the extra skin. The extra Kratos skin. All the rest of it, like the soundtrack, for example, and the documentary, didn't work at first. And it's really, really insulting to people when they have to pay a $40 premium over something and they have to redeem download codes for services that don't work. Particularly the soundtrack not working because it was stored on a website that was completely broken was a big bubble burster for me. A big bubble burster for me, especially given the fact that they could have mass-produced music CDs. They could have done that. Their price would have done that. Would have worked. Now, the songs included did not include DRM, which was nice. But this is a collector's edition. Collector's physical. Only physical things are useful to collectors like me. Having physical things include their value, or increase their value. Having a collector's edition made up entirely of DLC does not really give anything value. It just doesn't. Granted, like I said, the Pandora's box was pretty nice, and what was included with the art book was pretty nice too. But I mean, I remember BioShock 2's collector's edition, which had come out I think a bit earlier than that, had for the same price a full-sized record, a full-sized art book, embroidered maps, full-sized I'm sorry, not embroidered maps, but like full-sized posters and a CD. Are you kidding me? And I think it actually came with a DVD too, if I remember. I don't totally remember. Maybe it didn't. But a full-sized art book alone can sometimes be worth a $30 premium if it's good enough. What do you call it? The Metal Gear Solid HD collection when it released with a $30 premium. Because it had a full-size art book, made up for that. I thought there's no excuse for that. They could have charged. If they had charged $80 for it, I probably would have gotten them. Would have given them away. Especially given the fact that they later re-released it. They later released the DLC for pay. So there was nothing exclusive about any of the DLC to begin with. There just wasn't. And then there was also the problem with the pre-order codes and stuff like that. But that's, that was like another thing, was that, there were some people that just, that they decided when they gave out the pre-order codes, they didn't actually give out pre-order codes per se, but actually redeemable codes for the pre-order codes that had to be registered, and then you'd be emailed the DLC code. Well, some people didn't get their codes. A lot of people didn't get their codes, actually. So that was kind of shifty. That having been said, the documentaries that were, and to say nothing of the fact that I didn't like, the documentaries that they had included with it should have been included on a second Blu-ray. They should have done something like that. There's no excuse to why they couldn't have included a second Blu-ray or with the documentary on it, or a second or a CD with it, because I remember Metal Gear Solid 4 come out a year earlier with for $85 with a CD and a Blu-ray included with it, physical content, and that, oh my God, if you could find that, you'd be lucky. You'd be heck pressed. I got one of those. Man, I'm not selling that for anything. That thing is going to last forever. And so, like I said, if you find yourself a new copy of the Ultimate Edition of God of War 3, I don't even think some of those codes will even still work. Probably not the soundtrack codes, but maybe. Probably not the soundtrack codes, but the only codes I can probably think that would probably still work will be the codes for the challenge maps and maybe the codes for the video. But my problems with the video were as follows: it was a 3.5 gig, high definition download off the PSN, and they tied it to that console that I redeemed the code on. I didn't want to watch it on that console because I only had a 60 gig hard drive in that console. I wanted to watch it on a different console that I had a larger thing on. Even with all the rights transferred and all the unlockable stuff, even if even though I continued the download and finished the download and re-downloaded it on a different console, it would not work on that console. And that was complete BS. So Sony, you're trying to have a service where basically you can have purchased full-length HD videos, but you're not giving the user the chance to re-download them, and you're not offering any chance for them to back it up. They have to be able to back it up with their own volitions. You're insane, especially given the fact that you're charging the same price that I could go out and buy a DVD for that stuff. So all that basically was a huge tell for me never to ever buy anything off the PSN, at least not for movies. For games, it's fine because you can re-download your game content that you purchase, and you can use it in multiple consoles that you have your account tied onto. I think you were given like 5 consoles that you could activate content on. I think they changed it to 3, but even that's still pretty decent. So, yeah, God of War Ultimate Edition was a total disappointment, complete disappointment. The content, if it worked, wasn't bad, but there was literally no reason why they had to make you jump through that many hoops to get it done. It certainly wasn't worth a $100 price. I got ripped off. In fact, actually, the documentaries that were included in God of War 3 were actually better than the bonus documentary that they included with the Ultimate Edition. As far as I'm concerned, they should have included that documentary in the regular version of the game as a separate thing. I like that Peter Weller had done it, but I don't like that. I didn't like that they didn't talk about God of War 3 at all in it. It was pretty much about the comparisons and mythology between the first God of War game, the second God of War game, and the actual mythology. It was a good documentary because they interviewed a lot of knowledgeable people about it, like people from USC and the various universities at California. None from none as far as I know, none from any of the University of Californias that I had visited. But still, it was a decent documentary, but not justified with $100. That should have been 30. That should have been 85 or 80. And it was not worth having to jump through all those hoops just to get it to work, and having to keep it on my hard drive forever because I don't have any USB memory cards or memory sticks big enough to hold the data in. It's not fair. But that else, I don't really have too much to say about God of War 3, except to say that I guess, again, I'm going to spoil it, so I don't want to talk about God of War 3 as that much. So I'm going to kind of gloss over that. Most of my major stuff was all about the gripes about the Ultimate Edition that they had done. But also, if I remember correctly, God of War 3, when it came out on midnight in my local store, there's a video, one of my first videos I ever did, it was going to do the midnight release of it. There was next to nobody. There was next to nobody for that event, which was really disappointing. I remember when Halo Reach came out, I was shocked to see that many people. I remember when Call of Duty came out recently, when it was the night that Metal Gear Solid HD came out. I was shocked to see that many people were in my area. In comparison to when God of War 3 came out, here was a game that had a cliffhanger for a couple of years. People, for like 3 years, people had wanted to see that game. It had a fantastic demo. There was nobody at my store, maybe 4 people at most, to pick it up at midnight. So that was a bit disappointing. That was surprising. And that video was a disappointment. The video that I shot was a disappointment. Since then, I've kind of held off on doing midnight release videos and stuff like that. But you know what? Every once in a while, I might do it, depending upon if there's a lot of people. So there's that. And there's all that. Now, we knew that by the time God of War 3 came out, there was going to be one last God of War game that was going to get released. And that was going to go back to the PSP. And that was Ghost of Sparta. Now, if I have one thing I want to say about Ghost of Sparta, was that there was Sony threw out like everything they possibly could to get people to buy that day one. There were so many downloadable incentives to justify paying $40 for Ghost of Sparta, to buy Ghost of Sparta when it came out. It was just, it was like phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. They had exclusive skins. They had exclusive soundtrack download codes. They had the director's commentary. Sorry, it wasn't a commentary, but the director's interview. All of that alone was worth the $40. To say nothing of the fact of the game. They really did pull out a lot of stops for Ghost of Sparta. And I specifically remember picking it up, getting all the download codes, redeeming the download codes on my PSP, and having to download the rest of them on my PS3, like the Demo skin and the Legionnaire skin for my PSP, and just a whole bunch of stuff, like a whole bunch of stuff. But for me, what really did it, what was really impressive, was that director's video. That was a pre-order incentive for Ghost of Sparta. It was a downloadable video in 2 parts, which was downloaded through the games system of the PS3. So you could get it, and you can play it on multiple things. I think they learned their lesson from the previous documentary, from the Unearthing the Legend documentary, or whatever it was, titled the Peter Weller documentary, where they had all 5 directors from all 5 of the games together, interviewed by the lovely former G4 hottie Alison Hauslip. It was great. It was well done. It was a great interview. The production value was fantastic. I would certainly recommend watching that documentary to any God of War fan. I would recommend that to anybody, because there were so many tidbits that were included just from what David Jaffe and Corey Blaylock were talking about, to say nothing of the fact that some of the other directors were talking about. Where it was just a lot of background. By that point where they had done it, Ghost of Sparta had not yet been released yet, so they couldn't really talk about it that much. So that director didn't really have much to say, except he could talk about the background, but he couldn't talk really that much about the game or what they were doing with the game. But by that point, David Jaffe had plenty he could say about God of War 1, about his ideas for God of War 2 and God of War 3. And even, you could tell that Jaffe and Blaylock were good friends. Stig was kind of, they could talk. They were all great. They were all great. And the moderator was really good. Allison did a fantastic job about keeping control of the discussion, not letting it veer too much, not letting it get too crazy. It was, and the audience was great. The fact that they had chosen to do it in front of an audience was phenomenal. I wish I could have been there for that. I wish I could have been there in the audience for that. But I think it was just USC students that were there for it. So at this past E3 where I had visited, was the announcement that the God of War PSP games were coming to the PS3, that they were porting those over into a new collection called the Origins Collection. and they were including both people have been asking for those. In fact, I remember when the PSP games came out, or the first PSP game to come out, Chains of Olympus come out. People were complaining like crazy because they wanted God of War a change because they had known that the God of War games were a PS2 exclusive system. They had PS2s, they didn't have PS3. I'm sorry, PS3s or PSPs, and they wanted them to do a PS2 version instead, and they said no. They said no. This is a handheld game. This is going to stay a handheld game. Well, last year they reneged on that, and they said it's a PS3 game now, because by that point the PS2 had pretty much been outmoded. It was done. And I would have to say to anybody that's interested, even if you have a PSP, if you had to choose between getting the games separately on the PSP or getting the games together on the PS3 and playing them on the PS3, unless you have no PS3 or you travel a lot, get the PS3 version of the game. And the reason why is because the PS3 version of those games included all the DLC on the discs. Particularly the Legionnaire skin for Ghost of Sparta, which was a GameStop exclusive, I think. And the director's commentary was included on the discs. It just like with what they done for God of War Origins collection for the PS3, they included the God of War 2 bonus disc on the movie section under the game disc. All you had to do was just load in the Origins collection game disc, go over to the movies, and just watch the whole interview. It's an hour and a half long too, which was just phenomenal. And you can watch the whole thing end to end. I would recommend doing that. I would recommend just doing that. Just heck alone, the having the director's live commentary discussion is worth the price of the game. I don't know how much it's going for right now. I picked it up at full price. I don't know, maybe I might have gotten it for $35. But it was $40 when it launched. It might be $25 to $35 right now. Pick it up. It is worth every penny. It is worth absolutely every penny. To say nothing of the extra trophies and stuff like that. If I have one complaint about it, it's that it doesn't support the transferring system, so I can't move over the saves. But like with anything with the trophies are not cross-compatible with saves. If you have something already unlocked without a trophy, you can't just load the save and then get the trophies automatically. You have to do it all over again, which made a lot of people angry, especially people who played through Drake's Uncharted Drake's Fortune and had to 1000 it all over again. But for the most part, it's totally worth the price. The new graphics really did impress me, and that was one of the. I couldn't pick it up day one, but that was definitely an immediate purchase for me. I picked that up along with the Ico and Shadow of the Colossus collection, and I definitely recommended it. So that was the last God of War release, and since then there have been no announcements about any God of War games coming up. There's been no announcement of God of War 4, even though there was a cliffhanger, kind of, with God of War 3. There's been no talk about any more God of War games. So what does the present and what does the future have with God of War? Well, I wanted to say, actually, with the most recent events, I have actually, on the PS3 versions of the games, gone back and replayed all the challenges on the Chains of Olympus, God of War 2, and Ghost of Sparta challenges. And I was able to beat all of them. I never thought I'd do that, especially not the God of War 2s. But last night and a couple nights ago, I've actually been on a roll where I've been going back to my older God of War games, replaying the challenges and beating some of the challenges that I hadn't gotten, just so I can get the gold trophies and with them the platinum trophies with it. The only game, as of me recording this, that I haven't gotten all the trophies for was God of War 3, because I wasn't able to beat half of the God of War of the challenge of the gods challenges in God of War 3. I think I was only able to beat 3 out of 6 because they were really, really, really hard. They were really hard. And I was able to beat the game on hard before I was able to beat all those challenges, because I actually did beat God of War 3 on hard. Heck, I was able to beat Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta on hard as well. Not the highest difficulty. God of War 3, there's no point to playing on the highest difficulty. There's no trophy or anything unlockable for that as far as I know. For Chains of Olympus, there is some unlockable content. There's an unlockable skin, unlockable image gallery and unlockable video for beating the game on the highest difficulty. For Ghost of Sparta, there is a unlockable skin for it. Everything else is unlockable through using just the unlockable arena. And to unlock everything, you might as well just grind in the game with Legionnaire skin, and you'll be able to unlock everything after just a couple playthroughs. So there's that. So I got platinums on pretty much every God of War game. Unlocked almost everything in all of them. So that's all of my stories. For what's going on with God of War, in the future of God of War, I'm looking forward to a God of War 4 if they ever announce it. I'm looking forward to any future God of War game. Even if they do decide to make... I don't think they're going to make any more handheld games. There might be a Vita game for God of War. Don't know. They might do a God of War Vita game next. I don't know. PS3 is not on its way out by any means. It still has an install base. It still definitely has its players, has its dedicated players. So it'd be interesting to see maybe if they're holding off making a God of War 4 announcement because it would be on a platform that may be the next generation of PlayStation, which has not been announced yet. But I can take solace in the fact of the Robot Chicken sketch that was very recently, just to show that God of War is still in people's hearts and minds. The new season of Robot Chicken did have a God of War sketch. Heck, it had a Halo sketch also, but it had a God of War sketch where Kratos is fighting, the Kratos action figure is fighting through Greece, and he's getting blood orbs for killing things, and then it comes to the three-way scene. And the joke is that instead of two chicks, it's a girl and a guy. It's a naked girl and a guy. And Kratos is like, I'm not having a threesome with a dude. And he starts, complaining to Athena. He's like saying, it's like, oh, come on. Now you will get blood orbs for pleasing your lovers. He's like, but that's a dude. I'm not doing it with a dude. And she's like, okay, how about this? How about 1,500 blood orbs? And he gets to watch. Okay, well, how about 2,000 blood orbs, and he gets to just mess around with you a little bit. He's like, hey, we didn't agree with that. What do you think I am? It's like, we've already established what you are. Now we're just setting a price. So how about 2,000 blood orbs? Just throwing this out there. I don't think I should be able to even say this on YouTube. But let me tell you, if you want, just look at the Robot Chicken sketch, and it's a really funny parody. And I loved the punchline. I just loved the punchline. This is a moment where Athena got to be funny. So that alone was worth it. So those are my those are my God of War memories. That's a good 6 years of my life, and this is going way, way longer than I was expecting it to. But that's God of War for you, and that's what God of War is, that's what God of War has done for me. So this is Maniac with GameAccess.net, and I'll be seeing you guys on the next Game Access podcast. Thank you for listening. Have a good one, guys. Over and out.